As he sat alone in his dressing room, the soft hum of praise could still be heard through the door. But in his heart, there was a different sound, an empty, hollow ache. Ringo Starr had just turned 85 hours before, to the soft glow of birthday candles and decades of adoring cheers. But as soon as he read the words scrawled on the official letter from Apple Corps, the magic of that moment went away. The upcoming Beatles hologram world tour, which is meant to honor the band's legendary status, would go on without him. Instead of his live drumming, his clear voice, and even his personal thoughts on radio, digital recreations based on old recordings and synthesized samples would be used. It hurt like hell for the last remaining Beatle to realize he was no longer a live part of the story he had helped write. He read the message over and over in his mind. Unfortunately, for the sake of technical consistency and operational efficiency, we must exclusively rely on holographic likenesses and archival audio sources. We are very grateful for all the help you've given us over the years. He never talked about the nights he passed out on stage with a fever or the hours he spent perfecting the offbeat rhythm that became the heartbeat of songs like Ticket to Ride and Come Together. He also never talked about how his patience kept a band together when their friendship was on the verge of breaking up. The group, which was built on his work, seemed to have decided that Ringo was too human, or unreliable, to be a part of this big party. He remembered the first time he picked up a drumstick and hit a cotton bobbin mallet against a metal cabinet in the bottom of a factory just to hear the sound. That was the start of a lifetime of creativity. The wild nights in Hamburg, where the Beatles worked on their sound under neon signs in the red light area, mixing coffee and adrenaline to keep them from getting too tired. Half of the crowd chanted "Pete forever," Ringo never the moment he stepped onto Abbey Road as a real Beatle. Those were the tough times that made the drummer who would lead the most important band in history. Still, it didn't seem to matter any of that now. Those in charge of the shows thought he could be replaced, and they saw him as an object rather than an artist. Every beat of his heart made him think of the blood, sweat, and tears that had gone into every drum hit and cymbal crash. He got over his stage fright, his friends pulled jokes on him, and the illnesses that almost killed him were all part of the same story. But in this dull letter, all of his work was boiled down to numbers and file types. Every time he stopped in the middle of a toast to wipe away tears for the friends he'd lost, every time he had made a peace and love speech from coast to coast, it was all for nothing. As the shock wore off, though, he realized something else. This wasn't just a personal slight. It was a metaphor for how we treat pioneers when the fun goes on to something new. When new tools come out, the people who built history risk becoming ghosts in their own stories. Why pay the man who came up with the idea for holograms in the first place if holograms could do the job? And if Apple Corps agreed with that line of thinking, what would stop other organizations from making whole lineups of digital stand-ins for stars that they think are too weak to handle the stress of live performance? He knew he had to make a decision. He could give in to the corporate machine, sign the waiver that came with the notice, and let them paint him out of his own story. He could also fight. And fighting him meant coming out from behind the privacy of his conversations with Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison. None of them would ever need privacy again. He knew that his refusal to give up could hurt the Beatles brand as a whole, but giving up felt like signing his own death warrant. He took a deep breath and stood up. Every look in the mirror in his locker room reminded him that 75 years of sun and stadium lights had never dulled his energy. The wooden snare drum sitting nearby was an old friend that he could count on like the sound it made. He let his fingers trace the worn grooves in it. He remembered how music first saved him from being alone in a tuberculosis ward. He remembered how each drumbeat kept him steady in the bombed-out streets of Liverpool. He remembered how his off-kilter style turned mistakes into music and gave the band its signature groove. Behind the scenes, a stagehand lightly knocked on the door. They were there to tell him that he only had 10 minutes to meet the press and talk to guests. The world would know he understood more than he let on if he left with the same grace he had shown through every broken heart and happy ending. His heart was heavy with every quiet beat that would follow him across that line, though. He put his cufflinks back on, fixed his collar, and tried to look calm. When they were first squished together in a small cellar, John's grin teased him, George's shy approval made him feel good the first time he nailed a tricky fill, and Paul's cheeky thumbs up as they walked onto the Ed Sullivan stage, where 4,000 screaming girls almost tore each other apart just to see him. The boy from Madron Street, Ringo Starr, had always been the loser because he was afraid he would be replaced and that he wasn't good enough. Even though the chances were against him, he kept showing that he belonged. He slowly let out a breath, letting the stress leave his shoulders. People would soon greet him with cheers and smiles, not realizing the storm that was going on behind those blue eyes. But storms can change the landscape by cutting new tracks through solid ground. And Ringo knew better than anyone how a single beat could change the whole song. He walked through the velvet ropes and into a sea of cameras, speakers, and lights that were blinking. Reporters fought for space, wanting to catch every word and movement he made. He felt like a relic under glass, pinned between stage pillars covered in Beatles memorabilia and studied but no longer seen as a live artist. Flashbulbs made a rapid rhythm that sounded like the drum beats he used to play, but they also showed something else: how weak he was. With his heart in his mouth, he gave the well-known half-smile that fans had seen him do for years. People used to call him the heartbeat of the Beatles, but today that beating seemed in danger. When someone yelled, "Ringo, will you support the hologram tour?" he raised an eyebrow. He paused, thinking about how to balance devotion with the hollowness of a practiced act. His throat was clear, and he let the words come out clear and strong. "I like the creative idea behind introducing new people to the Beatles' legacy, but I won't stand by and let myself be erased." Laughter echoed through the room. The soul of our music lives in the hands that played it, in the laughs we shared backstage, and in the moments that no machine can copy. The cameras worked faster. He saw the producer of the piece look over her notes to find the next soundbite. He made a straight face. It wasn't about technology taking precedence over art, it was about respecting art and people in general. A reporter's voice rose as they asked, "Are you threatening to sue?" A small smile formed around the edges of his mouth. "Yes, if that's what it takes to keep the truth safe. But this isn't just a legal fight. It's a fight for being real. It's my story as much as it is everyone else's who has ever loved our music." He looked around the room and let every electric eye land on him. The event was more than just a news conference, it was a statement. After the show, he went backstage, but the questions followed him like echoes in a hall of mirrors. Melanie, who has been his helper for a long time, greeted him with a sympathetic nod and a tablet full of messages from fans. She showed him a letter that said, "Ringo, you are the real deal." "Thousands have written in," she whispered. Somebody else said, "Don't let them turn you into pixels." Someone else said, "We need you live on stage, not stuck in a loop of pre-recorded holograms." These voices made him feel something strong. They didn't want a recreation, they wanted the real person who put heart into his work. In his quiet dressing room, he sat down in an old leather chair and watched the video on a small screen. His own words were clear and rebellious, and they could be heard all over the room. Outside, he could hear the holographic trailer for the tour far away. It was advertising sold-out shows in London, Tokyo, and New York. It seemed strange that the band he helped start was being broken up into light beams and motion capture files. It was amazing, but it was missing the real drummer who helped build the rhythm section from scratch. He clenched his teeth and picked up the phone. Harrison Cole, his lawyer, was the first person he called. Cole had dealt with everything from trademark issues to complicated recording rights. He said, "We need to move quickly. I want a court order that stops them from doing anything until we can come to an agreement. And I want safeguards that make sure my performance, or at least my direct involvement, remains vital." On the other end, Cole's voice cracked with agreement. There were plans made to meet with executives from Apple Corps, people from the estates of Lennon and Harrison, and the tour's technical leaders. His next move was to call Olivia Harrison. George's widow had always been a loyal friend who knew how hard it was to balance a legacy with a way to make a living. After 2 rings, Olivia picked up. He told her the news: the worldwide celebration of their shared history could erase the presence of their 2 dead friends in favor of lifeless models. "Their guitar solos will sound great, but your late husband won't be there," he said in a low voice. "And that's not right." Olivia's pause was heavy with years of keeping George's memory safe. She said she would help and offered to get in touch with Yoko Ono and the John Lennon estate. As a group, they would stand strong against the rise of digital music, with 3 voices protecting what the Beatles were all about. He hit the drums with all the accuracy and style that used to shake stadiums during a short soundcheck in the late afternoon. He promised himself that he would fight to keep the real soul alive, in gear, on stage, and in real people. Fans who caught a glimpse through the backstage curtain clapped and stomped their feet. In that roar, he heard the voices of millions of people who wouldn't settle for a meaningless tribute. The sky turned orange and purple as the sun went down behind the arena. Ringo Starr looked down at his hands, which had held sticks and shaped a cultural change. That human touch couldn't be replaced by an image or a list of ones and zeros. He stood up straight because he knew that the next day would bring more negotiations, more news stories, and the threat of company inertia. In a dimly lit boardroom, he was with his closest friends, Harrison Cole, his sharp-suited lawyer, Melody, his loyal assistant, and Maeve Johnson, a seasoned music industry strategist. But for tonight, the real Beatle walked off stage as himself, alive, defiant, and determined to make sure everyone knew who kept the beat. There were contracts, hologram design plans, and financial forecasts all over the long oak table. Harrison drew possible legal paths while Maeve carefully tapped a pen. "We need leverage that sticks," she said in a low voice. "Not just court orders, but also what the people want." "Apple Corps will bend if fans rise up," Ringo said with a steely nod. "Let's remind them whose names are on the sign," he said. They plan to use a coordinated media effort, a petition from fans, and an offer to work together on the hologram tour, but only if he agreed to certain conditions. It wasn't an act of aggression, it was a chance to change how we value history while also welcoming new ideas. In the late evening, Ringo sat in his home studio with heavy curtains closed to block out the London night. He touched the old drumhead surface, which was scarred from years of traveling. There were pictures of cobblestones in Liverpool, neon signs in Hamburg, the Abbey Road crossing, and most recently, a picture of him hugging his beloved granddaughter. He let out a sigh of relief, knowing that his fight wasn't just to protect his story, but also a tradition that would last for generations. He remembers how shocked people were when they first heard that the tour would be better than him. Now, he was making up a story in which technology helped people instead of hurting them. The next morning, the news was full of stories like Ringo's last stand. When he walked onto a famous talk show, he was greeted by a banner that said, "The drummer's darkest hour." The host leaned in to talk to him. "Ringo, everyone loves you, so why fight your own legacy?" Ringo laughed in a controlled way. "Heritage isn't about missing the past. It's about the truth. My friends and I wrote history together. If you play the record without the record keeper, you lose the heartbeat," he said. That's why he wanted live performances to include holograms of John and George, with him and Paul switching between real-time appearances to make sure the experience was true and mixed. People in the crowd cheered, and some got up to join in. At that moment, he took back the focus. Behind the scenes, Maeve set up a petition called "Keep Ringo Alive on Stage." Within hours, hundreds of thousands of people joined it, telling personal stories about how Ringo's drumming changed their lives. A Brazilian teen fan said that watching his videos helped them learn how to play the drums. One soldier who lived through Vietnam said that listening to "With a Little Help from My Friends" helped them feel better when things were crazy. These stories weren't just facts, they were emotional shots fired at the heart of business apathy. Hashtags on social media became popular. The story was picked up by major news sources. Ringo's stand had become a hot topic in pop culture. At the same time, executives at Apple Corps headquarters were busy handling a problem. A department that used to plan tours got a lot of legal warnings and questions from the press. They lost the confidence they had at first and started writing defensive notes and calling PR firms like crazy. As the stress rose, boards were cleared and meetings were pushed back, and a shocking truth came to light: without Ringo's support, ticket sales dropped during the pre-sale period. Even die-hard hologram fans were hesitant to buy a pair of glasses that didn't have their original spark. As people started to talk about the terms of the discussion, Ringo could feel the pendulum swinging in his favor for the first time. On the third day, he went to New York to meet with leaders from Apple Corps and the families of John Lennon and George Harrison. The meeting room looked less like a place for the music industry to meet and more like a place to negotiate a treaty. On the walls, portraits of the original group stood empty. Behind long mahogany tables, people from law, creative technology, and public relations stood. Ringo was there, but he wasn't too noticeable. He started with a simple request: include his live acts in the hologram experience and talk to him about how to make it seem real. He stressed that working together, not against each other, would bring the most benefit, both mentally and financially. The room went quiet. The mood changed after hours of thought. A high-level manager pushed forward. "Sir, we miss the intangible touch you have. People want to see the real Ringo." To give it a try, they came up with a new format, a hybrid show with live performances by Ringo at the beginning and end of each set and holographic projections of John and George in the middle, with Ringo hosting interactive parts. The rules of his revenue sharing were changed to reflect his fame. As sketches were redrew and signatures were added, Ringo felt a sudden sense of pride. He had fought not only for himself but also for all artists whose work could be harmed by digital copying in the future. He went back to his hotel room that night and called Paul McCartney. "Is it real?" he said with a voice full of emotion. Paul's laughter echoed through the line, and you could feel his relaxation. "Well done, mate. Beat them at their own game." They talked about the negotiation and then their younger days, exchanging jokes that made the fight seem less serious. Before they hung up, they decided that during some stops on their upcoming tour, they would do a reunion video call with fans and share memories in real time, which would add another level of authenticity that no hologram could match. As Ringo got ready for his next public showing, he thought about what was at stake in his fight. It was more than just a personal win, it was a turning point in how we honor live legends. He knew that technology opened up a world of opportunities, but that it should not replace human creativity. Every time the drum hit, he brought the promise that the real soul of music is in the spaces between the notes, in the human spirit that dares to create, connect, and refuse to be quieted. He woke up early in the morning, excited and antsy. When he walked into his home studio, the London skyline was still just a shadowy shape. The only sound was the soft tick of a metronome. Ringo picked up his drumsticks and tapped the snare. He was listening for the steady heartbeat that had helped him get through sickness as a child, the craziness of Beatlemania, and now this momentous occasion. When the sticks hit his hands, they felt good and reminded him that no hologram algorithm could copy the subtlety of his touch. Later that morning, he met with the creative technology team in a building that had been turned into a studio close to Shoreditch. Hologram screens, motion capture data streams, and old Beatles instruments like George's Gretsch, John's Rickenbacker, and Paul's Hofner bass were set up on tables. Before turning to the lead tech, Ringo ran his finger along the dusty bodies of the guitars. He told them, "Show me how you'll mix my live beat with John and George's holograms." The technician started a scene that included see-through versions of John and George appearing in the air and playing "Come Together" with a virtual drum kit that was mapped to Ringo's live performance area. A high-tech audio interface made it so that when he tapped on a sample virtual drum, the sound quickly matched that of his real snare. He agreed, amazed by how well everything fit together, but he insisted on some changes: raise George's projection 2 feet to get rid of shadows, make John's lighting match the style of Abbey Road, and change the mix so his live hi-hat stood out without drowning out the digital guitars. That afternoon, rehearsals began in a set that had been changed. The team kept quiet as Ringo walked on stage under the glow of the stage lights. John and George appeared in hologram form. He started singing "Ticket to Ride" and made a confident beat that echoed through the huge speakers. From his seat in the control room, he could see the holograms following his every move with their eyes. During one test run, John's link dropped for a split second, which broke the illusion. Ringo waited for the song to end and then said through his headset, "We need smoother transitions, no jumps. It must feel alive." Technicians worked quickly to make delay buffers work better. By dusk, the scene played perfectly, and Ringo felt the joy of unity, the past and the present coming together in real time. That night, he held a small party for his biggest fans in a room next to the main stage. Dozens of longtime followers walked in, their faces lit up with excitement. Ringo shook everyone's hand and looked at them with bright blue eyes. As they settled down on a mix of chairs, he stood on the drum riser and said, "Tonight, you're the first to see what we've made. It's great to use technology, but only to respect what came before." The room was filled with awe as John and George's holograms played a short repeat of "While My Guitar Gently Weeps." Fans recorded their reactions on their phones and shared them right away. Seeing Ringo and holographic George live, it's unreal. Their voices went viral online, spreading the message that real feeling needs a real musician. On the next 2 nights in Manchester, the clearance windows for the first hybrid performance opened. The event organizers were on the verge of a much-needed PR boost when all the tickets sold out in minutes. When Ringo got to soundcheck early, he was met by the loud roar of a crowd that had been let into the empty arena to practice. He climbed up on the drum riser with a heartbeat that could be heard over any speaker. At the start of Don't Pass Me By, the hologram showed up, John's laser-etched silhouette and George's ghostly figure swapping solos in perfect sync. The crowd's unplanned cheers filled the huge hall, and Ringo closed his eyes to enjoy the moment. History was being made. Backstage, he got a glimpse of himself in the mirror. It showed an old man with silver hair who still had a youthful look in his eyes. As he drove, he thought about the boy whose father had left him, the sick child whose life was saved by doctors, and the shy Liverpudlian who ended up at the Cavern Club, then in Hamburg, and finally on Abbey Road. Each hardship had turned him into a way for everyone to be happy, a heartbeat in a world that was hungry for peace. Now, decades later, he was connecting generations to make sure that new audiences heard the real heartbeat of the Beatles. After the last practice, he spoke to the crowd over the sound system. The show tomorrow is for all of us, those who were there in the 1960s and those who will see us for the first time in the 21st century. Let's make it a celebration of what music can do, bring people together, heal, and inspire. There were cheers. Technicians shook hands. Melody, his helper, gave him a cup of tea. He sipped it slowly and felt the warmth ground him. He got ready for the press call the next morning before the actual launch. There were billboards all over Manchester that said Beatles Live, past and present, together. People would ask about contracts, holograms, and the band's impact. But Ringo was ready. He had practiced his points, but more importantly, he had practiced his truth, that art is more than just the medium it's made in, it comes from people's hearts and hands. He took a quick look at his phone and read through some tweets from Beatles fans who couldn't imagine their lives without Ringo behind a real drum kit. A hologram can look like George, but only Ringo can make me feel like I'm alive, said one tweet that said it all. He smiled and put his phone in the pocket of his jacket. He would keep that promise tonight. After leaving, he shut the door and walked into the hall. At the end, stage lights flashed. He walked toward history while straightening his jacket and tie. Two generations came together in a single breath. When Ringo got to Tokyo, he saw that people's views had changed. 10,000 fans came to Nippon Budokan to see the real person, not just a phantom. His drums hit the stage as holograms of John and George showed in perfect sync, making it feel like the band was back together. People in the news called the show the real deal, and in Sydney and New York, ticket sales went through the roof. He thought of Paul's video thumbs up. The number of live streams went through the roof, and fans from Brazil to Germany shared emotional reactions, showing that real music must be made by real people. Behind the scenes, Ringo drank green tea and thought about how far he had come, from being a sick kid finding rhythm in the basement to becoming a world-famous performer who showed that humanity still matters in show business. He thought about the boy whose father had left him, the illness that almost killed him, and the drum fills that had saved him once. He played a solo without planning to, a flourish that wasn't marked on any computer map. It was his signature, that quiet beat, to tell us that technology can copy sight and sound, but it can't copy soul. The crowd's loud applause at the end of the show was like a promise, the real heartbeat would always beat any imitation. It was exciting from the first crash of the cymbals. He began I Want to Hold Your Hand with a traditional 4-on-the-floor beat. John's Rickenbacker shimmered at the same speed, and George's riffs fit together perfectly. The audience rose and moved between the real and the virtual, showing that a smooth blend of the two could respect the past without seeming like a cheap trick. In the middle of a day in the life, he took a short, out-of-breath break and let the silence last for a moment before starting the orchestra's rising finale. At that very moment, everyone there knew they were a part of something historic. A song that had been recorded in pieces in the studio was now being played in its entirety. As he moved into Back in the USSR, he leaned into double-time fills, and the stage lights flickered to make him sound even swaggerier. At the end of the song, John and George's holograms bowed in a silly way, and Ringo replied with a smile that only old friends could share. There were cameras there, but the real clapping was louder than any flash. A wave slammed through the arena when With a Little Help from My Friends was the last song of the set. The mixing of real heartbeats and digital ghosts showed how powerful creativity can be over time. After Manchester, word of mouth spread like crazy. The hybrid idea was hailed as brilliant by critics, who called it committed nostalgia and the future of legacy performances. Headlines in major news outlets read, "The beat goes on, live and unfiltered." Fans shared clips and stories and replied with hashtag Keep Ringo Alive. Even skeptics agreed that the human heart could not be replaced. There were heated arguments on blogs and groups about whether or not other acts could use this method. The way Ringo played became a model for artists. At the same time, his team put together packages for Tokyo, Sydney, and New York. Each one had its own special touches, like karaoke in Japan, drum lessons in Australia, and street parades in New York's East Village. Ringo and Melody went over each plan on a private jet headed for Narita. He liked looking for places to play because it made him think of new people who would enjoy his music. Paul shocked him with a video cameo and told him to "Don't overthink the fills, mate." That joke reminded him why he worked so hard, not just for fame, but for the fun of playing drums in front of real people. As he put down his tablet, he felt like he had a new purpose in life. Legacy wasn't set in stone, it was living, changing, and still unfolding beat by beat. He woke up early in the morning, excited and antsy. When he walked into his home studio, the London skyline was still just a shadowy shape. The only sound was the soft tick of a metronome. Ringo picked up his drumsticks and tapped the snare. He was listening for the steady heartbeat that had helped him get through sickness as a child, the craziness of Beatlemania, and now this momentous occasion. When the sticks hit his hands, they felt good and reminded him that no hologram algorithm could copy the subtlety of his touch. Later that morning, he met with the creative technology team in a building that had been turned into a studio close to Shoreditch. Hologram screens, motion capture data streams, and old Beatles instruments like George's Gretsch, John's Rickenbacker, and Paul's Hofner bass were set up on tables. Before turning to the lead tech, Ringo ran his finger along the dusty bodies of the guitars. He told them, "Show me how you'll mix my live beat with John and George's holograms." The technician started a scene that included see-through versions of John and George appearing in the air and playing "Come Together" with a virtual drum kit that was mapped to Ringo's live performance area. A high-tech audio interface made it so that when he tapped on a sample virtual drum, the sound quickly matched that of his real snare. He agreed, amazed by how well everything fit together, but he insisted on some changes: raise George's projection 2 feet to get rid of shadows, make John's lighting match the style of Abbey Road, and change the mix so his live hi-hat stood out without drowning out the digital guitars. That afternoon, rehearsals began in a set that had been changed. The team kept quiet as Ringo walked on stage under the glow of the stage lights. John and George appeared in hologram form. He started singing "Ticket to Ride" and made a confident beat that echoed through the huge speakers. From his seat in the control room, he could see the holograms following his every move with their eyes. During one test run, John's link dropped for a split second, which broke the illusion. Ringo waited for the song to end and then said through his headset, "We need smoother transitions, no jumps. It must feel alive." Technicians worked quickly to make delay buffers work better. By the time it got dark, the sequence had played perfectly, and Ringo felt the joy of unity, the past and the present coming together in real time. 2 weeks after his successful start in Manchester, he landed in Sydney, where the Opera House sails stood out like white banners on a sea of possibilities. The venue, which was on the bay and filled with seagulls and high voices, was buzzing with excitement. When Ringo stepped onto the outdoor stage, the sun was shining on his snare drum, and he started playing "Hey Jude" with all his heart. Behind him, holograms of John and George appeared against the blue sky and swirled into a shape as fans waved flags and sang every word. It felt like a moment between remembering and making something new, and with each crash of the cymbals, he could feel the heartbeat of humanity returning. Instead of replacing the living spirit, this moment showed that technology could make it stronger. He used the momentum of the tour to start the Ringo Starr Rhythm Foundation in Australia. He met with leaders of local music education groups after the show. At a long table full of dedicated teachers and students, he heard tales of how drumming had changed the lives of young people in remote outback towns. As he shook hands, he signed drum pads and gave technique tips, which inspired the next wave of beat makers. News cameras caught him promising to give money to scholarships and instruments in need, and this promise was seen by many people outside of the concert. Back at his hotel suite, he got emails from all over the world, from Brazil to Bangladesh, thanking him for using his fame to give kids who don't have much a chance and spark their artistic dreams. When the tour got to Madison Square Garden in New York City, the city that never sleeps felt more solemn. A lot of fans crowded into the venue, holding vinyl records and old posters while they waited for the hybrid experience to start. When Ringo came on stage, there was a huge cheer that felt like a wave. As he sat behind his clear drum stand, the glow of cell phone screens rose like stars. During the Count in 4 revolution, the holograms of John and George came on, cutting through the noise with their famous riffs. In between songs, he told stories about recording at Strawberry Field and playing in local clubs with the band before they became famous. People who heard his honest stories were told that even legends used to laugh, cry, and learn like everyone else. Ringo kept a notebook in the hotel while on tour. He wrote down notes about meeting fans, sketches of how the stage would look, and early ideas for new projects. He wrote about how well the analog and digital worlds worked together and how each hybrid event was a conversation between the past and the present. One post talked about a problem with the hologram that turned into a fun interactive moment. John's projection stuttering made Ringo improvise a fill that changed the song. The crowd cheered louder for that honest moment than for any well-planned show. In his last post, he said that the experience showed that technology could bring out the human side of music when artists refused to give up their views. When he finished the book, he was sure that he had set a permanent example and encouraged many others to do the same. As news of Ringo's success spread around the world, a huge number of fans and artists came together to support the idea that creativity needs to be connected with other people. Social media pushed all of the big acts to commit to live shows along with digital upgrades, which led to debates in groups. At the same time, Ringo's Rhythm Foundation named the first grant recipients in Mexico City and Johannesburg. The foundation will give drum kits and workshop vouchers to youth who need them. In a video message to his fans around the world, he promised, "Music is a bridge, not a barrier." That phrase, "Let's build experiences that honor the past, embrace the future, and keep the human spirit at the center," became a mantra for a new era. It showed that one man's stand could change the way things were done in his field and inspire a generation hungry for authenticity. At the last show in New York, as the last notes of "Here Comes the Sun" blew through the air, Ringo stopped with his drumsticks in his hands and looked out over the sea of faces lit up by the stadium lights. In honor of his virtual bandmates who had gone on one last trip with him, he raised his stick in the air. He then tipped his head and played a powerful last fill that blew everyone away. Fans cried and cheered when they realized they had seen a living hero at the top of his game, showing that no algorithm can replace the warmth of presence and the electricity of improvisation. As the lights went down, he went back to the stage by himself, put his hand over his heart, and bowed. This created a beat that will last for generations.